Hi, everybody. I'm Jonny Torres. This is The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. We've got a show full of topics, full of opinions, and now we just need your input as well. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and share throughout the broadcast. And don't forget, you can also subscribe to the audio version of our podcast on the Google, Apple, and Spotify platforms. And coming soon, another big platform where you're going to be able to find this show. So stick around for more news on that. In the meantime, let's go ahead and break down today's topics. First, we're going to just touch really quickly on the RNC cancellation in Jacksonville. Then we'll go right into COVID and controversy. It's just become the divisive issue of the year, and we're going to talk about why that's happening and how can we move forward from that. The Supreme Court making a lot of big decisions, including one in California that is certainly controversial and unexpected. Also, what's going on at the Chinese embassy, other than a little campfire they got going. Social media censorship. Obviously, do you like it? Do you not like it? And what effect is that going to have on our upcoming elections? So we'll break down those topics with today's guest. We had one sneak up on me there. Right next to me, Chris Licata. Welcome back, buddy. Across from me, Chris Verkuilen. Looking very festive today.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had a plaid shirt on, but a certain other Chris stole my image. So, we have that.
Yeah, well, he certainly doesn't have the fireworks going. Gotta love it. What red-blooded American doesn't love fireworks?
Police officers in Portland.
Democrats.
That's right. And then beneath me, joining me, pretty much as always, is Anibal Cabrera. Hello there, sir.
Gentlemen.
Nice hat. Yeah.
I've tried.
All right. Let's jump right into today's topics. Again, this one, a quick one. For those of you who might not know, I was part of the convention in 2012. So from that perspective, I'll tell you, the canceling of the ceremonial portions of the convention, I think, not a big deal. It's kind of one of these things where as a Republican, you're kind of conflicted, because you're basically working to put on a publicly funded event that costs millions of dollars. That really is nothing more than ceremonial. Other than that, politically, doesn't really do a whole lot. You get a bump for about a week, and then that wears off, and then it gets nitty-gritty back into the issues and debates and all that kind of stuff. Do you guys think the cancellation is a big deal? Yes or no? Licata?
Of course, you come to me with my mic off. The cancellation, I think it has a lot less to do with COVID and it has everything to do with COVID, but it also just has to do with the splitting of, between North Carolina and Jacksonville, and the crime rate that's going on in Jacksonville is one of the things that people aren't talking about, is spiking like crazy. No, I don't think politically, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I think Trump's still going to give a great speech. Everyone made a big deal about the fact that Trump's rally out west didn't have the attendance it was supposed to have, and yet it blew the ratings out the door. So it's, people will join in virtually. It'll be fine.
How about you, Verkuilen?
Virtual conventions suck. Let me start with that. I was really happy we are going to have it in Florida this year. It was my chance to go see the big show in person. This is not a very frequent opportunity for people. It's not always going to be in your state. And it speaks volumes to me that we cannot have a political convention. We cannot have political discourse because of violent crime spiking in our country. So that's something we should really focus on more than anything else, is making sure we can continue to have these things without fear of being shot in the streets by people like.
Well, you made a good point there, and this is why I think the whole strategy on how the host cities are picked needs to change. Typically, they'll go into states where they need help, right? Where they feel like they need to make up some ground. Like I said, these conventions don't really give you much of a bump of for more than a week or so, and then other than some economic impact, it doesn't really swing the vote. And so my opinion is we could have avoided this whole thing between Charlotte and Jacksonville and the cancellation if they just would have picked a red state to begin with that would have allowed the thing to go through from end to end, and North Carolina just, and specifically Charlotte, just didn't want to play ball. And honestly, I think if this had been in 2012, having Buckhorn here, I think, that's kind of when the tables would have turned. I think he would have turned on the convention and said, hey, given the circumstances, you guys are going to have to kind of tamper this down. And that's when you need a Republican in office, that's going to play ball when issues like this come up. Anibal, what do you think?
I mean, at the end of the day, I do believe that the governor of Florida is a Republican, and the mayor of Jacksonville are Republicans too. So it being a red or blue situation is not that big of concerning. I think what was the concerning part was the spike in cases, and that is the fear and the uncertainty of coronavirus is not just a red or a blue issue. It is going through multiple political affiliations when it comes to the concern of certain people, because it's about the health, not about your party affiliation. So in this regard, I think it was probably the smartest thing to do, which would be to allow for the public display of the convention, not to move forward. I agree, it's gonna suck. I really wanted to be a part of the convention. I was planning to attend the actual event in Jacksonville, and so that is a bummer on my case. But at the end of the day, I think the safety is more important than anyone else and anything else. And I think that if they would have held this in Utah or somewhere else in the Midwest, I think that might have been different. And I think they would have, the state and the city would have interlined with it better. But because it's an East Coast city and there's a kick up in coronaviruses in Florida, I think that's what doomed it on this coast.
Let us note, though, that the spike we had was a false spike. We had labs that were exaggerating their cases by tenfold and not reporting negative cases. I would be one to gander, think about if this was done possibly intentionally. You've seen how many cases were inflated and not actually reflections of the real data.
I'll give you that. I really do think that there's a lot of people that are purposely sabotaging the economy and purposely sabotaging the test results to ensure that this president doesn't get a win whatsoever. I mean, there's a beautiful cartoonist that illustrated how Democrats for the last 3 years have been waiting for something to take out the president: impeachment, the economic downturn. They're all midterms. They're all expecting it. And at the end, the last box in the cartoon is just the donkey of the Democrat Party holding a Molotov cocktail and says, "Oh, I'm just going to do it myself." And I truly believe that. I think there are a lot of people, even inside the administration, that are manipulating and doing things that should not have been done to make the president look even worse than it is now. So the sabotage is on a whole nother level. And I think that, again, the harder you try, it's like the same conversation as thus protest too much. The more people fight it, the more likely I think the president's going to win at the end, because people are that upset and pissed off to see such rigging of the Democratic primary election cycle, of the test results, of even the mail-in ballots. When did that become a political Nerf ball in Florida? We've had mail-in ballots for 30 years. And so I think people get so upset. And so the fact that the president took the step to just cancel the public version of the convention, even though that means more people will watch it, and the number of people watching will be what people report, not just what it looks like.
Well, here, I'll say this before we go into the next topic, which is I don't think there's a conspiracy regarding the COVID numbers, specifically regarding the president. What I think it is, and it's something that's already been well documented, is that hospitals are mislabeling deaths and cases and ICU cases as COVID, because that right now is pretty much their primary source of income.
Yes.
And these hospitals are losing money hand over foot. And so I don't think it's as political as it is financial, and them trying to manipulate the system to make money however they can, because until recently most elective surgeries had been postponed. So it's one of those things where, you have to wonder if it's going to be the beginning of the end of these conventions. I mean, it's something uniquely American. At this point, it doesn't accomplish anything. It's completely ceremonial. And so,
but
again,
it gives energy to the base. And that's what I'll say, is that it gives more energy for the base. The convention is for the base. And then everyone tunes in the last night to hear the nomination, everything else. And that's what people love. They want to see the Florida call out its delegates, and they want to see all that. So it's not really meant for the nation. It's meant for the party itself. The Republican Party has, and all the other ones have a tradition of having these conventions. I don't think this is the last convention. I think this is just the first convention that's going to, and both parties are going to do it. I think conventions will come back roaring once everything is died down again.
I mean, the worst part about all this is that this is going to be like two of the worst award shows that you've ever seen. I mean, that's basically what this is going to look like, because once it's televised and virtual and all that nonsense, I mean, it's just going to really take the emotion out of it, right? Like the excitement, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of what they put together. But especially on the Democrat side, they're going to roll out all the celebrities they can, like they always do, and it's going to look like another award show. So certainly not looking forward to either one this year at this point. All right, we were touching on it a little bit right there. We were talking about COVID and controversy. Of course, there's you throw a rock and you'll hit somebody with a different opinion on Dr. Fauci. And certainly we learned that Dr. Fauci couldn't hit a rock if he was the one throwing it, after that terrible, terrible pitch. And then the pictures that subsequently came after. But, I think it simplifies where America is right now. You don't know what to believe. You don't know what not to believe, because it just seems like every day there's new information that negates the previous information. And it seems like the people that you're supposed to be listening to, regardless of who you think that is, has taken just about every side of this issue. Chris, I know you're kind of worked up about this, Verkuilen, especially on the mandated masks. And so, again, I mean, do we reach a point where this all gets sorted out, or do you think at this point we're going to be arguing about this until it goes away?
We're going to be arguing about this in 10 years from now. Honestly, people will look back and say, no, I was right. But it's like, no, you weren't the week before that. You're full of it. I mean, it's really funny, like I said before in this show, when you have experts that have had the same opinion, the same exact stance on an issue for 30 years, and then a week after something big happens, it changes. That doesn't make sense to me. So we have now this big issue of schools reopening. A lot of the issue with schools opening has been due to the COVID surge. But again, we've seen, like you were saying, with hospitals over-reporting things, that I understand it's a small portion of it. When you have labs that are doing the testing, over-reporting, and not reporting any negatives, so our positivity rate goes through the roof, and you see that very stat and ones that are being quoted by teachers unions saying, we can't go back to school because of this. But there's all these articles everywhere showing this was not the case. This was a fluke. This was wrong. And you have TBT, the newspaper here locally, saying we had 127 deaths in this one day. No, it was 19 deaths in one day. We just had 4 days reported at one time. And that makes the headline. You don't see 19 deaths as the headline because that would be good news. When everything slants in one direction, it's not a coincidence. It is propaganda, and it's what's driving the rhetoric right now.
I completely agree with Chris. I think what's happening now is you're really starting to see the bias when it comes to the media. Why is there so much attention being put onto Florida right now when we're not even the highest state in the country with coronaviruses spiking in their areas? Nor was the love affair lost on New York when their governor basically were sending old people to die in the retirement homes. So I really don't, you see it blatantly now how corrupt the media has become when it comes to this story, because you make it sound like Florida is the only state that's spiking in Texas when you have Illinois and California having such hard times regaining control of their spread and having to close back down, where Texas and Florida are not officially closing back down as they did in the past. When it comes to schools, the misinformation has been done so horribly. The fact that there's not been one reported transmission from a student to a teacher of the virus. When I heard that, and this is not locally or in the state, Florida, or the nation, this is globally that there isn't. and more research needs to be done on the and of why children are not spreading it, nor are they having any, or nor are they contracting to the level of the rest of the population. And if anything, a school system should be trying to figure out ways to make sure teachers are protected amongst themselves and figure out ways to continue teaching. If we were able to keep on teaching during World War II and able to keep on teaching during the Spanish flu, then we should be able to keep on teaching now. And I get it. If you are coming from a home that has an immune system deficiency when it comes to someone in your household, then don't send your children back to school. That is just a given. And the majority of school systems are allowing you to have multiple options on what to do. And when you see counties like Sarasota and even Hillsborough County, when a slight majority or super majority, their parents are going to send their kids back, the school has to teach them. The kids have to get fed. They have to be bused. The number of jobs that are reliant on Hillsborough County, which is the 7th largest school system in the country. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen safely. And instead of us trying to be an example for the rest of the nation, you have people in some parts of the administration of Hillsborough County school system that want it to fail or not open at all.
But again, goes back to the root of the problem is that we don't know if the information, the data that we're looking at is genuine or not. We know it's flawed, that's for sure. We just don't know to what extent, to what severity. When you're talking, is it hundreds of cases or thousands of cases? And again, even as to how to treat it. I mean, there's been every perspective on how to treat this. At first they said you don't have to wear a mask. Now they say you have to wear a mask. And then you look at other countries like Japan, who virtually did more or less what we've been trying to do here in terms of getting people to wear the mask, shutting down partial, part of their economy, limiting, obviously, the travel, who's coming and who's going, and their death count was incredibly low. Their case number of cases was also incredibly low, and even they don't really have a legitimate or a hard-lined explanation as to how they accomplished it. And I think
but this is also not their first rodeo when it comes to this. For in our lifespan, even our parents' lifetime, this is the first time we're dealing with a national epidemic to this kind of severity. And the last one I could even think of would probably be HIV or even H1N1, when the nation was being rocked this severely. But again, and so with Japan, they deal with this constantly when it comes to health issues and everything else. So
they got bad neighbors.
They do have really bad neighbors.
We'll get to that later.
So I think we have to be able to see other countries and use their data to be able to move forward with us. I mean, countries that thought they had had fixed their health systems. Some of the best healthcare systems in the world is Italy, Spain, and even some parts of Asia were rocked by this. And I feel that our system has done very well to stop the hemorrhaging.
Licata, I know. Yeah, I was going to say, you and I both have kids. Mine is expected to go into school the first week of August. And how are you feeling about that? And again, what do you kind of look towards, or you and your wife kind of look to in regards to feeling whether or not your kid should go back to school is going to be a safe decision?
Well, thank you. And yeah, my son, he'll be attending VPK as of Monday. So, I'm excited. He needs the social interaction. He needs the education. He needs, the play. Playing with grownups is not a good substitute for a decently socialized human. Not when you're 4, right? It is. So I'm all for sending him back. He's a healthy kid. My wife and I are on the same page on that. So I think more broadly on the COVID thing, I think I'm very interested on people's perspective on their personal interaction with either the testing site or and where that necessarily drives their politics. And I don't know where that necessarily leads, but I mean, the number of people I know who have said, yeah, I got a COVID test. I tested positive. I quarantined for 14 days. I didn't have any symptoms. I didn't feel anything, and then have later on gotten an antibody test and said, no, you've never had it. So it's like, wait, you know, I was like, was it a false positive? Was it a, you know, so I think there's a lot of frustration with people. They're like, they don't know if they should trust the test. They don't know, you know, and when it's personal like that, when it's either yourself or someone you know or someone you work with, because if it's someone you work with, then it's like, well, do I need to get tested now? And this is what drives this is, you know, I wouldn't say hysteria, but this mass drive to all of a sudden everyone needs to go get tested. And then they lose tests. You know, I have some people who they got tested a month ago, still haven't gotten a test back. You know, it's like, so how do you, you know, I don't know where people's personal politics with all of that and how that drives. If people are just like, you know what, I'm just going to go live my life. I'm going to do me. And, you know, if someone runs a fever, I'll deal with it then. But I'm tired of living in fear. I'm tired of living in, you know, under a rock, you know?
Yeah, well, and, you know, and to be perfectly honest, you know, I did a similar thing. I got the antibodies test. Now, I should have done it the other way around, but I got the antibodies test first. Then I did the swab test, and I got a negative on the antibodies and a positive on the swab test. You know, and so again, you're kind of left not really knowing. And you know that these tests really weren't designed for this. You know, this was, you know, these are, you know, kind of placeholder tests, you know, because again, this is a new virus, you know, and so we don't even know the accuracy of the test. And that's one of the things that's being questioned now, you know, but even my daughter got it, you know, my daughter, you know, tested positive, you know, and she fortunately had no symptoms whatsoever. And you know, my niece and nephew got it too, also no symptoms whatsoever. And that's one of the points that a lot of people are making, which is that unless your child has some other pre-existing condition, there's a very small likelihood that this is going to affect them in any way. Even if they do catch it, they'll probably be asymptomatic. And so it is up to the schools to decide what are the policies and procedures that are going to dictate how this is handled, you know. But, you know, to put that responsibility on the governor is ridiculous. That's why we have a school board, is for them to make those decisions based on what's best for their district. So if
I can interject, it's actually, I don't even think it's on the school board. I think it's mostly on parents.
I completely agree. I think it's completely on the parents to make that decision if they want to send their kids back to school or not. I am so frustrated on how individual citizens of this country are so reliant on the government making decisions for themselves and their own families. That is so disgusting to see that. That, again, if you don't want to send your kids, don't send your kids. But how dare you try to influence my family decision making? That's not your right, and you shouldn't be able to make that right, nor should you force the government to make that decision for me either. And I think that's where we're having this huge, I think it's becoming a much bigger conversation, a bigger problem. And just to announce, Hillsborough County schools are going to reopen August 24th. They're being pushed back 2 weeks. And I think that might be something that you see in other districts, that they're looking at the data, they're looking at the numbers, and seeing what that 2-week flow looks like. Because even now, our deaths and cases have started to diminish significantly compared to where they were a month ago.
Well, and to that point, I mean, even when it comes to e-learning or virtual learning, whatever that you want to call it, you know, you're cramming 20 to 30 kids into a Zoom meeting, and they all have their microphones on, they all have their cameras on. I mean, it's a nightmare for teachers, you know, because they don't have any control over the situation. And to your point, Anibal, I mean, we both have teachers in our lives, and teachers have options as to whether or not they want to teach the school year.
Exactly.
And so, you know, exercise that right if you're that uncomfortable with it. And if you're willing to take the chance to go back into the classroom, then take the precautions necessary. But there's absolutely things that can be done to try to minimize the rate of infection, you know, and hopefully prevent it. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, I don't think 2 weeks is going to make a huge difference. Obviously, we'll see a drop in case numbers. You know, one can only hope. But you know, the fact that the school hasn't, you know, in all these months devised a solid plan that they've all agreed on, having had the whole summer to do it, I think is also absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not just talking for Hillsborough. I mean, this is nationwide. You see these school districts panicking because they don't have a plan in place. It was like, well, what were you doing all summer? It's not like you didn't know it was coming.
That's off time, Jonny. What are you, silly? That's off time.
That's right.
There is still a large, there is still I want to say, a decent number of people still working for the school district, even during the summer. There are still 12 month employees. What were they doing? What was the administration doing to battle this situation? And again, I'm going to put a lot of blame and a lot of focus on the teachers union. What are you doing to push back on when it comes to teachers getting sick and having to use all of their PTO time that does not encompass the full amount of time that they're supposed to be quarantined? I was going to say, Hillsborough County individuals usually get 10 days for the entire year, like the full calendar year. And to be quarantined for 14 days, what's going to happen there? What is the administration doing for online students? And Jonny, I get it. You said about 32 kids being online at the same time. That is definitely not happening. I will tell you that right now. Majority of classes do not have that kind of participation. It's happening. The number of families that need laptops, the number of families that need food, all this stuff does not happen when it's all online. It's complete failure. And that's why we need to get these kids back into school.
I've got a proposal. I'm going to suggest it to you guys for the first time. So regarding people who are healthy and can go back to work, if you want to stay home from work, if you're healthy, you can take out a loan from a bank backed by the federal government for 70% of your normal pay. And that will accrue interest, and you will be forced to pay that back within 5 to 7 years. I think that would be a strong impetus for people to go back to work. There's no reason, if you're scared and you have a reason to, great, but you're going to pay it back, as opposed to me going to work and paying for you to be off.
Well, thanks, Chris. Now let's go ahead and move on to our third topic of the day, and that would be the Supreme Court. They've been quite active, even during all this quarantine, coronavirus, pandemic stuff going on. That has not slowed the Supreme Court down, even minus Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently coming out with a ruling where they basically sided with the state of California and saying that it's totally cool for casinos to be open and operational, but churches can't go to church, can't sing in church, a whole bunch of stuff you can't do in church. Obviously you would think a clear violation of the First Amendment, and not so according to the Supreme Court. I mean, is Roberts continuing to be a huge disappointment, or is he just trying to play both sides of the fence here? We'll start with Verkuilen.
I actually didn't read Roberts' decision. I read Gorsuch's dissent, and it was very, very clear. What he had to say was the constitutionalist interpretation of the situation. He found it to be egregious that a casino can have 150 people in the same room, but if you go to worship God in your church, no matter how far away you are, the state can say there can only be 50 of you, or there can only be 100 of you in this building or this room. It's absolutely insane how one can provide, can think that gambling is a more important pursuit than practice of one's faith. I can't see how a person that has studied in the law can come to these conclusions. It blows my mind. This is clearly partisan, or clearly, not any intellectual value, the decision they made.
So I agree with everything Chris is saying. I'm just saying that the decision was a denial of cert, which means the Supreme Court. So this had already gone up to the state Supreme Court, and then they appealed directly to the Supreme Court of the United States on a First Amendment ground. And the Supreme Court wrongly said, we're not going to hear that. Now, that doesn't mean that they've decided the case on the merits. That just means that they're saying, no, this needs to go through district court. This needs to go through the normal process. We're not going to take the case on an emergency hearing at the Supreme Court at the end of our session. Now, Gorsuch's dissent, which was rightfully worded, is saying, no, we should take this on because the state Supreme Court is wrong and is infringing upon the First Amendment rights of the people in that state, which we have a duty to protect. So that's what's going on. I don't want us to get confused in thinking that they affirmatively said, like, oh yeah, the states can pretty much do whatever they want. I think this case will be heard within the next 18 months at some point, but they didn't want to hear it on an emergency certification.
It's a good clarification, Chris. Thanks.
Not a problem.
I will say I am disappointed in the Supreme Court for not taking up this case to hear. It's not just happening in California. It is happening in multiple states. Even our own state at one time was causing huge havoc within the religious community. And I think that this is a direct violation between the church and state in regards to dictating who can and cannot or how many people can and cannot be participating in religious services. If a religious community decides to meet in person, then that is their decision to make, even if there is health complications and that can occur with the meeting of the individuals. This is still America. I'm sorry, I don't agree with the fact that the government is dictating to religious organizations how many they can and cannot. Also, you can see that it's being directly pushed on the Christian and Jewish community, whereas other religious organizations are not being as pressured to.
Like who?
So there are some Muslim organizations that are still meeting and still doing the call of prayer, and yet there's no pressure on them to stop with their meetings in person. And also you see a huge part when it comes to the Jewish community in the Northeast that's being very much victimized and pressured to stop their religious services. And who would have thought that a New York mayor would be causing such distress inside the Jewish community in New York City? So I think what's going to happen is just it's going to have to go through the courts, and I think it does need to go through. I wish I would have been able to go straight to the Supreme Court immediately. But I think when you tell people no, they're going to keep on doing it. So churches should just be creative. And again, I'm not going to say that the government is telling churches not to meet, or they're stopping or infringing on their First Amendment right, because that's for the courts to make that decision. I will say that any attempt to stop, hinder, or even police church services is the violation itself. And any step in that direction should be stopped immediately. But I feel that church organizations have started to move forward anyways, meeting in person. Florida, I know many churches have moved their services to the beach so that they're able to continue to do services. So people are being creative and whatsoever. I want us to make sure that we're being clear. It's not like the government's saying that we are not allowed to practice our beliefs. I think that the government in some states is being overly zealous when it comes to control, and I think that's when the line is drawn.
Well, Anibal, it comes right back around to the thing we were just talking about earlier with schools, is that ultimately the decision's with the parent, and ultimately the decision should be with the church or with the congregation, depending on church government. So it's these decisions do not need to be made at the federal level, at the state level, or at the city council level. They can be made at the most local level, which is your peer group, and to criminalize that is such a violation of the concept of the Bill of Rights, and we see this going on even in some municipalities in Florida. Is like, no, you're not allowed to have, the city council says you're not allowed to have your business open. It's just like, I don't know if that's for them to decide. Now, am I going to necessarily go patron that business? I don't know. Depends on the circumstance. I might not, because I'm capable of logical thinking. I'm a grown up. It's like my children are not. But I am. And I don't like this move that local government, state government, and federal government is going to treat the people as if they're children.
Well, and the most obvious disregard for our freedom to worship, right, regardless of religion, is the fact that they've specifically said that while you cannot get together in a place of worship, that you're absolutely welcome to go ahead and gather for a protest of about 1,000 people. We're seeing it in Portland, Seattle, Austin, and you have these huge turnouts for the protests, which, hey, God bless them for getting a huge turnout. But you also see tons of people not wearing masks. You see tons, you see people in close proximity. They're literally locking arms, at these protests. And that's acceptable. And that's not a danger to public health. But somehow, people getting together at church where you have control of the environment is. And so, the level of hypocrisy here and the outright just disdain and disrespect for the religious community, regardless of faith, is just evident. And I hope that, those that are on the left who do consider themselves to be people of faith will realize that these, liberals are legitimately attacking your right to worship and to practice your religion. I think somebody needs to point it out to them, because they won't see it for what it is. But again, the hypocrisy, the double standards, I think people are sick and tired of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump comes out and makes that a campaign issue, that actually pulls some votes for him, because there are people in my circle of friends who are completely apolitical, who have now become engaged because they're sick and tired of the shutdowns. They're sick and tired of quarantining. They're sick and tired of the mask mandates. And regardless of how you may feel about all that, that is going to dictate the way that a lot of people vote in this upcoming election. And so, back to, I think, what a couple of you guys said, this is affecting so many states. The Supreme Court should have absolutely stepped in here and made that decision. Roberts right now is kind of a wild card. And so, I can't say that we can predict which way it would have gone, but nonetheless, it should have been their responsibility to do that. Guys, let's go ahead and jump into the next topic, which is the little campfire they had going out in Houston, Texas at the Chinese embassy. China just seems to be doing everything they can to tick everybody off. Gosh, if this isn't a red flag, I don't know what is, right? Because they're burning documents. They were told to vacate the building. And so now here we have certainly a controversy, definitely a conspiracy. Let's start off with Anibal. What are the Chinese up to in Houston?
Well, as of Friday, last week, the U.S. claimed that the Chinese Houston consulate for the U.S. was a site for espionage and trying to steal medical research. And then after they made that claim, they also put in for the arrest warrants for 4 Chinese nationals that had lied on their visa applications for the United States. Some people might think that this is not a big deal. This is a very big deal. These 4 nationals did not disclose that they were military officers. They did not disclose that they were high-level intelligence gatherers, and they're now on the run. I think maybe 1 or 2 they have been arrested already. But that's the problem that's occurring with this escalation when it comes to the United States and China is just taking another round that it needs to take when it comes to the closing of consulates. I believe the U.S. has 4 consulates in China, mainland China, and 1 embassy in Beijing. I wouldn't be surprised if there's continual escalations of this. China is very upset with our blocking of their technology in many Western and Eastern countries. They are very upset with us with our trade blockage for them as well, and they hate the idea that the U.S. dollar is the #1 currency in the world. So with all that being said, you're going to continue to see flare-ups when it comes to this. I'm even going to say that we're probably already in the new Cold War when it comes to China and the United States. I see it ending probably the same way the last one ended, with the opponent of the U.S. basically crumbling from within because it couldn't put itself together, not really because of a military effort. But China hasn't been able to keep friends for the last 6 months. Their relations with Russia and India have completely deteriorated. India has been getting weapons deposits from Russia and France, whereas those contracts have been canceled. In China, you're having huge pushes when it comes to Japan and Australia. So if we continue to see that kind of movement, it's the new Cold War, and it needs to happen.
No, I mean, it's a great point because, with all this coronavirus stuff, that obviously originated there, as the president calls it, the China virus, you would think that they would have backed off and said, hey, let's play nice. Let's get back on everybody's good side. Let's go ahead and just kind of try to smooth things over, until this coronavirus thing dies down. And it almost seems like the opposite. It's like the curtain has been pulled back. They've kind of been revealed for who they are. And so now they're just being open and blatant about their disdain for the United States and how angry they are that they've been found out when it comes to Huawei products. Europe is now caught onto them in regards to their technology, and they're starting to get blocked throughout Europe. So this is not the end of it. I think if anything, we're at the very, very beginning of this. For Colin, what do you think?
So there's two main issues here. The first one is intellectual property. One of the U.S. government's first and foremost jobs is to protect U.S. trade. The reason our capitalist system works is because if I take my time and effort and put it into making something as great as a coronavirus vaccine, I need to reap the profits from that, or else I'm not going to do it. That's how we have become the biggest enterprise, the biggest means of medical advancement in the entire world. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is you have people in the Chinese government who cannot do this kind of thing. The Chinese government, even though they're embracing more open trade and more capitalist-like behavior, their state runs most of their operations, including their medical system. So because this system does not work and it fails, they have to cheat. They have to steal to make their empire seem to stand up and withstand these kind of things. So it's a high stakes game for them. But the fact that they're sending military officers into our academic institutions, our research institutions, our medical infrastructure to take our property and to undermine what we have going on here in the U.S. is really a bad look. And I don't think we don't have a place trading with them if they're going to continue to do stuff like this.
Chinese situation, has obviously, I think, has been kind of snowballing slowly but surely, towards all this. I think the coronavirus just basically, just added a whole lump onto it. What do you think?
Yeah, I've said on the show before, and I'll say it again. I don't think China, either China is not a unified state in 10 years, or it is, and it's in the style of North Korea. So like the fork in the road for China is really, really hard for the next 10 years. And, as far as U.S. relations go, I mean, I'm seeing online that, they've retaliated. We've had to close our Tibetan consulate in exchange for the Houston consulate. And it's going to continue to go this way. I think China was trying to play for time in the U.S. relations. They were trying to just kind of grow their economy and grow their military and play for time to a point where they could be big and bad enough to take us on. Coronavirus has completely wiped any of that off the table and really codified the rest of the world against them and really shown them to be the player that they are. So the only play they have now is to become the totalitarian state that I think they're going to become, or they'll shatter and they'll fracture into 5 or 6 different nation states.
Well, unfortunately, I think it's going to be the worst of those because, as our good friend Ben Shapiro said in a podcast I was listening to this week, Chairman Xi is easily, the strongest chairman that China has seen since Mao. And you see how quickly and easily he was able to take down Hong Kong and put in, the Chinese measures there in regards to silencing their free speech, among other things. It's quite scary to see what's going on there. And that's not even touching upon the fact that of what they're getting away with in regards to the Muslim Uyghurs. And that, the United States or anybody else has continued to look the other way on that issue. And you got to wonder what's going to be the breaking point here. I would have figured it was the virus.
Well, I'll respond to that in saying that I think there's a moral conundrum that the United States has to face. And it's, do we end China in the way of walking away and closing off all trade to them, and in which case you will have a very violent situation in all of Asia as it implodes, or do we continue to play with the devil that we know? And like you said, I think the worst of those is a dictatorship, is the direction that China's going in, and we're facilitating that by being involved. I think if the United States completely walked away and said, no, Asia's going to handle Asia's problems, It's a much bloodier mess, which is why we're trying to avoid that. But it's one where you don't have a totalitarian state, a totalitarian nuclear power. You know?
But you already have a dictatorship inside China. I think that's how it's built. And so just because they might change the leader every few years doesn't mean it's not a dictatorship. What I will say to this, at the same way that we pressure Chinese companies and other companies around the world to stop child labor, I think we should do the same tactics when it comes to slave labor. That is exactly what's happening with the Uyghur population in the northwest or northeast part of China. That's definitely what needs to happen now. There's many documentations that show that the Chinese government is busing hundreds of thousands of people, of Uyghurs, to different parts of China to work in factories for low or no wages whatsoever under the act of like re-education. I mean, that's what's happening now. So if you put pressure, and companies will only do it if they're either mandated by the government or they're pressured by the capitalist system. There's a reason why the NBA will not sell you a shirt for free Hong Kong, but they'll let you write F Trump or F the American people. Like they'll let you build a jersey that way, but they won't let you build a free Hong Kong jersey. That tells you who is in the pocket, and you have all these athletes that are in the pockets of the CCP. It's not the Chinese people. It's the dictatorial, tyrannical government of the CCP that's causing all these problems. And like we've seen many times in history, what happens with an overly centralized government doing this much, they cannot stop. They couldn't even construct dams in their own country correctly. 3,000 have already collapsed in the last 10 years. They're having record flooding in the last 2 weeks. They're unable to, they have, I think it was like 50, I think it was like almost 100 million people that are unemployed at the moment. The cracks are getting wider. And the only thing a tyrannical government knows how to do when that starts to happen is to make everyone else the enemy so that your people at least feel that you're fighting for them. And that's why they're making everyone upset.
Verkuilen, what are you thinking about China? And again, where do we draw the line? Where do we say enough is enough?
I think Anibal and Chris have summed it up very well. I mean, with the issue we have with race in America right now regarding slavery, this is 160 years ago in America. This is now, today, millions and millions of people in Asia. If we could focus our effort there, we can make a difference in people's lives today, not 160 years ago. I think that would be an excellent impetus to begin changing our foreign policy with China. I think I've said all I had to say on the matter. They're bad people, the government of China. And like Anibal said, the government isn't the same as the Chinese people. It's a good differentiation to make. We don't hate Chinese people. I will say I probably could hate certain people in the Chinese government because they're just evil people.
Well, in regards to what's happening here in the United States, I think the first good move by Trump was obviously lowering the corporate tax rate, and bringing a lot of that production and a lot of those dollars back into the United States. Second, of course, were the tariffs that he placed on Chinese goods. I think third step is just shut them out completely. At this point, there are plenty of other countries that would love to make our products, including this one. It's not like we don't need the jobs. And so, that would obviously be ideal. And I think it would get us, going in the direction that we were going in prior to the coronavirus. All right, we're going to close out today's show. Thank you so much for watching. We got one more topic to go. And this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and that would be social media censorship. The latest being that there was a group of doctors speaking in Washington, D.C. in favor of hydroxychloroquine or something. I can't even pronounce it. But anyways, the drug that may or may not be helping people in all this coronavirus and COVID recovery. And Facebook, YouTube, and I'm sure even Twitter have taken to censoring this video. Even though these are licensed doctors that are speaking on this topic. And of course, if you haven't been paying attention, over the past 6 to 9 months, there's just been story after story about these platforms also censoring the president's campaign for re-election. because they don't like the message, they disagree with the message. They're obviously trying to throw it under the guise of hateful messaging or it being incorrect, and with misleading information. And Christ, I mean, if you're going to start censoring people in politics for misleading information, then we just might as well just shut the whole thing down. I mean, because politics is pretty much made almost entirely of misleading information.
Well, subjective.
Exactly. And so at what point, do we draw the line on social media censorship, and does a responsibility fall on the platforms, or does it fall on the government intervening? And again, as conservatives, it's obviously a tricky kind of position to be in, but who gets to make these calls? Verkuilen, go ahead.
So regarding the most recent events, the video that was taken off of Facebook yesterday, I will say when I first came across the video being censored, I was really angry. I still am angry about it. I've seen information since then that the people that were speaking have some really bad things regarding their beliefs. The information that they said, though, is still true. Just because they were bad at something else, I think it regarded like gay conversion therapy or something like that, and some other point in their life. The video was pulled down because of that, or something else that made him a quack. But if you watch some of the Project Veritas stuff from James O'Keefe and his crew over there, you've seen HR directors, you've seen managerial people within Facebook saying, we need to make this lean left. We're an anti-MAGA corporation. You see this stuff repeatedly happening throughout these organizations. And you see people who work with this technology saying, 80% of what comes to my desk as a flagging agent or an agent to moderate content is conservative content. Most of it is things that people like us would have to say. And what I've seen is you have these black boxes that go over content, and it says, this is false or misleading. And you see this much is true and this much is false. And they're labeling it as false and covering it because of that one small portion in order to subjugate the message.
Well, like Anibal said, I mean, in some of those cases, in regards to memes or graphics and that sort of thing, some of the information is subjective, and it's presented from an opinionated point of view. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but they're obviously classifying it as such, and that is one form of censorship. I mean, we're also seeing the fact that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter just decided to get out of the political game completely in regards to ads. But we're seeing that they are not allowing the Trump campaign or severely limiting the Trump campaign to run ads on social media. And so, they went from allowing Russians to run advertising, 4 years ago, to now just openly going against a particular campaign and saying that, look, we're not going to allow you to advertise on our platform. And that in itself is the manipulation of elections.
Mm-hmm. And by all means, if you're going to have this kind of stuff happen, let the other part, the opposite party, disprove it and make them look stupid. There's no reason you should be doing it from the platform standpoint.
I think what we're watching now is the culmination of us playing on the rope's edge of what is a publisher and who is a platform technology company. I think that is going to come to a head at the end of this election cycle. I truly feel that we're moving in that direction where, and again, you saw Zuckerberg really push back and say, no, whatever they're posting, they're allowed to post as long as it doesn't cause violence. So like Facebook is pushing back. Twitter has completely allowed itself to be manipulated by the mob. And when you get to that point, it never pays. And so we're seeing that now in these companies that are trying to manipulate, trying to police, and it's just being detrimental. Because again, the fact that it's like you telling the internet not to do something. The moment you tell the internet not to do something, it's going to do it. And so you tell Americans not to do something or something's lying. Who are you to tell me if something's lying or not lying? You guys can't even get a point of view across from a kid getting yelled at by an Indian guy in Washington, D.C. Like, if you can't even get that story right and just jump on it, then why am I going to trust you in anything else? And I feel that more people are emphasis on different streams of information. The more information people get, the better informed they are. And also, 90% of conservatives are not going to flag Democrats' videos and posts and everything else because we're going to read it, we'll laugh, and we'll move on. Whereas the Democrats, and also liberal progressives, not really Democrats, get beyond offended, and that's why they get reported more often than left-leaning memes and everything else, because they'll report it because they're upset and they want daddy, the state, to do what they don't want to do, and that's change the channel.
Well, let me tell you what's also going on here is that you have groups of people who are making an organized effort to report certain content so that it gets flagged by these platforms. Now, they'll all tell you, their initial response to flagged content is automated. It's an automated process because they can't possibly hire enough people to validate or verify all of this flagged content. And then following that, then they escalate it to someone to do a manual review. Well, again, that manual review is also going to be biased. It's not going to be an objective manual review for the reasons that we've just discussed. These people are in the heart of Silicon Valley, and they have their views, they have their agenda, and they're going to stifle any content that they don't deem falls in line with that. Licata, I know you like to play around on these platforms as well, and is it time for the government to intervene and say, okay, well, we're going to tell you, how you need to censor or not censor this content?
Well, I would reword that question in the regards of saying, is the current law that allows internet platforms to not be liable as publishers, because so the problem is a legislative problem, right? It is something that we created this special platform. You're a platform. You're and now they're acting like publishers. So like Anibal said, that's going to come to a head. And if you're going to behave like a publisher, then you should be liable like a publisher. But they want to have their cake and eat it too. They love the fact that law gives them their special platform status, and then they don't have to, and they're not liable as a publisher. So they have their cake and eat it too. And I think it is time that Congress goes ahead and addresses that. Furthermore, I think it's the one of the best things that could probably ever happen to this show is us get censored or taken down, because I know all of us and a lot of the people who watch would be very vocal about it. And we would probably get some bigger names to retweet the fact that we were taken down. So it backfires on them so quickly, because I never heard of these doctors a day in my life, and I certainly didn't look into what they ever said in the past or anything. But the fact that they were censored now opens the door for them to be retweeted, and for the right to then say, well, look, you're silencing them. So now they're getting even more views. And, so just let people say, again, most people are grown-ups and they're able to identify what is not true from what is true. Right.
Well, yeah. And the most frustrating part is that in regards specifically to the drug that they were talking about, again, there are conflicting scientific studies, medical studies, in regards to whether or not it's an effective drug for the coronavirus, and to what degree. Again, all these vaccines, they're all going through trials, and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. There is no definitive statement here on what works and what doesn't work against the coronavirus. And again, there are studies that show it does work. There's studies to show it doesn't work. And I think that those opinions need to be heard on both sides of that argument.
When did it become an issue to allow for doctors to make the best decisions for their patients? I don't understand where this complexity is. And again, it's that Trump derangement syndrome. Just because Trump said it, that means it has to be wrong, and they have to fight for it tooth and nail. And that kind of behavior will destroy the Democratic Party because of their narcissism and their unwillingness to put the people first. And again, you're silencing a Black woman that has a doctorate just because you don't agree with her, yeah, that looks great. And people get pissed. Again, I can't wait for November.
Well, now that to me is the biggest kind of red flag in all of this, is that you had licensed doctors, again, licensed here in the United States of America, despite the fact that this particular doctor happens to be from Nigeria. And sure, she may have some other controversial views or opinions, but she's licensed by a medical board, and she was willing to put that on the line, and she said so, for the fact that she believes that this could be a suitable treatment for COVID. And that's her medical and professional opinion. Now, if she gets removed from the medical board for it, again, that obviously are the consequences that come along with that. But again, she has plenty of studies to back up her statement, and I think that's where they crossed the line. All right, guys, we got to wrap up the show. We're out of time. Thank you so much for watching The Yard Sign. Again, it's the most important and relevant podcast in politics. We had more stories than we could possibly get to in today's show. So real quick, we'll go down the line and see, what's the big story you are watching. Verkuilen, what's the big story we didn't get to today?
Oh, I think you got all my favorites. I mean, actually, I lobbied for a handful of these topics on here, so I'm satisfied.
Nice. All right. Well, that's a win. I'll take it. Anibal, what's the story you're watching?
I am watching the new Netflix special, Indian Matchmaker. I think it's hilarious, terrifying, and tremendous at the same time.
Oh, my God. That's another show completely. That's not for this show. Get that out of here. All right. Chris Licata, what's the story you're watching?
I'm still, watching like a hawk, the new HEALS Act. That the Republicans have put through, and I'm surprised by a lot of the stuff in the bill, but we might actually have ourselves a law as early as next week. Who knows? So I've been watching that very closely.
All right. Well, as heartbreaking as it is, I'm kind of watching what's happening in professional sports. Not that I'm all excited about watching professional sports this season, given all the social commentary that's going on. But the Marlins, having over a dozen cases after one series with the Philadelphia Phillies, may end up shutting down the whole Major League Baseball season. And so the coronavirus craziness continues. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jonny Torres for Chris Verkuilen, Anibal Cabrera, and Chris Licata. Let me get them on here one more time. This has been The Yard Sign. We'll catch you next week. Thank you so much. See y'all.